Talofa lava, this is Pacific Waves from RNZ Pacific. I'm Susanna Suisuiki. Coming up, the rift among New Caledonia's pro-independence groups widens. Also,
as we're looking into the past and celebrating that, we're also thinking about the future.
Pacific youth are called to step up and take care of the region, and
trying to stay culturally grounded, but also make sense of it here in New Zealand.
does service to our family come at a cost? The National Congress of New Caledonia's pro-independence platform, the FLNKS, has been postponed due to major differences between its hardline components and its more moderate parties. A large group of CCAT militants turned up to the event at the weekend and were kept waiting in their vehicles on the road with the hope of being allowed to take part in the FLNKS Congress. New Caledonia government spokesperson Charles Ware says they were not allowed in due to security concerns and the whole meeting was called off.
There are many people who came, more than 200, and in terms of security, it was not a good thing to host the Congress and also to let effectively the different political parties to have more discussion.
Charles Ware says a meeting is to be held to decide on a new date for the FLNKS Congress meeting. I spoke with our correspondent on the French Pacific desk, Patrick de Cloyter, and began by asking him to explain the widening differences among New Caledonia's pro-independence groups. Can you explain or provide a breakdown as to why there are differences among New Caledonia's pro-independence groups?
So it's not really news to say that there are differences within the FLNKS, which is in itself a platform of pro-independence parties who was created 40 years ago. And the serious civil unrest that came at that time during the second half of the 1980s was actually ended with agreement again. And at that time, the charismatic leader who was leading the FLNKS was Jean-Marie Tjibaou. He was considered as one of the moderates within FLNKS. FLNKS is a gathering of parties which are Palika, Kanak Liberation Party, the Oceanian Progressist parties, and the historic party, which is Union Caledonienne. And over that period, the Union Caledonienne was more and more considered as a hardline party. There are two trains of thoughts within the FLNKS. One is those parties, moderates, who are still considering that the best solution is to continue negotiating with France. And Union Caledonienne is the sort of hardline component, which more and more now tends to think that independence must come now. And the fact that the latest FLNKS Congress on Saturday was postponed again is a clear indication that these differences remain. As you know, last month, these more civil unrest erupted in New Caledonia. And if you go a little bit back in time, over the past few months, since last year actually, Union Caledonienne was trying to push their school of thoughts. And that's why they actually reactivated what they called a Field Action Coordination Cell, which is known locally as a CCAT, which is considered as the main driving force behind the riots of which started on 13 May. There was this Congress, an attempt again from the whole of FLNKS to find a common position. And what happened at this Congress on Saturday is that um, the Union Caledonian came late, but came, the leaders, and they brought with them a very important group of members of this CCAT. And the local organizers happened to be on this particular Congress. The local organizers were Pasifika and, of course, the custom chiefs and leaders of the host village. And they were only allowed 10 representatives from CCAT, which is not a member of FLNKS, but they said, okay, for 10. But there were many more coming on Saturday. They were kept outside the village on the road. There was a long line of vehicles, and it was a surprise for the organizers, the moderate organizers, and so they went straight into what about 1 hour meeting or so. And when they came out, the only decision that FLNKS could come up with was to say, we cannot allow that many CCAT members to take part in this Congress because it poses very real security reasons, security issues. And so that's why this Congress was postponed. That was the official term.
So then why is there a climate of fear among these moderates?
It's a syndrome from 40 years ago. In 1988, the Chibau, the charismatic leader of FLNKS, accepted to shake hands with the pro-France leader of that time, Jacques Lafleur. 1 year later, in 1989, he was shot down by members of the hardline faction of FLNKS. This seems to be part of history, but it's not really. It's still very vivid. It seems that at this time, even if the Pasifika, for instance, party, or the other ones, more moderates also, want to resume the talks with the French government and the pro-France parties with the intentions to arrive to a consensus and a compromise on the future of New Caledonia. Even though there is this will, it's obvious. And these guys also from the moderate parties are still calling for calm in New Caledonia. There is a very real climate of fear as well, because they can't help remembering what happened to Jean-Marie Tjibaou.
Appreciate that, Patrick. Yeah, a great insight into the current situation with the moderates. Now, I'm just gonna, change tack slightly with our interview, but can you explain what impacts the riots has had on New Caledonia's economy, and can the territory make a full recovery?
It's a good question, because now we know there are sort of persistent figures that say basically that there's about 600 companies and businesses that have been looted, vandalized, burnt down. There's more than 7,000 people in New Caledonia who have lost their jobs as a result of that. The total figure for the damages, now we hear more and more the figures from the Chamber of Industry, which says it's well over 1 billion euros, if not 1.5 billion. And obviously this has immediate repercussions for the New Caledonia economy. The local government of New Caledonia is also calling for assistance from France. There is a kind of solidarity set up by Paris on that one, especially for the companies, and to help taking care of jobless grants. But this is not as enough to cover all the expenses and the damages and compensations that jobless people would hope to get. And certainly New Caledonia cannot really take care of all that burden, additional burden. On top of that, there is also an existing situation which is obviously being compounded by the latest riots, and that is that over the 3 or 4 past years, New Caledonia has been faced with cash flow problems. And last week, again, the government of New Caledonia was writing to Paris to ask for emergency assistance of at least maybe 300 million euros, just to be able to pay for their staff and their public service, to allow it to continue functioning normally. Because if nothing is done, according to them, by the end of this month, they won't be able to pay for their staff anymore. And the airport was set to reopen yesterday. They said the access road between Nouméa and the airport had finally been kind of secured, but it looks like it's not always the case. So they're trying to reschedule the flights only in the daytime, not at night. And bearing in mind that they've sort of relaxed a little bit the rules of the curfew, which used to be from 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. Now it's 8 p.m. to 6 a.m.
Young people at FESPAC have responded to the call to action by elders to lead their nations forward in the face of looming challenges like climate change and to preserve their culture. Event organisers say there was a record turnout of young people, part of delegations representing 25 nations. Tiana Haxton spoke to the youth delegates in Hawaii.
The Festival of Pacific Arts and Culture 2024 hasn't just been a family reunion. It's also been a poignant opportunity for the passing of the baton from one generation to another. Miss Pacific Islands Moimoiana Shwenki says it is time for young people to step up and take the lead.
It's also a time that we can come together and remind each other of the gifts that we've been handed down and what we need to preserve. And I think as we're looking into the past and celebrating that, we're also thinking about the future, and there's a lot of amazing discourse that's taking out to remind our young people what they need to step up into and continue advocating.
Taumana Kihi, a visual artist from Rapa Nui, says being involved in the festival has made him realise the value of traditional knowledge passed on to him from his father. He has developed a strong sense of responsibility to pass it on to his future children.
And I'm happy here to show my culture because that's our ancestors left to us. It's my work to represent now. Because more long in the time, it's going to be my children. I need to be prepared to teach him how my dad did to me.
Litasha Mandiola agrees. As a young mother, she looks forward to the day her children will have the chance to represent Guam at FESPAC.
We're going to be ancestors soon, so I want to continue the traditions and the cultures, especially because I have 2 kids of my own, and I really wish they were here to experience it, but I know that maybe in the next 8 years or something or so, they'll be able to experience the cultures of not only our culture, but the cultures of everyone, and see how we are one, how we become one, how we share our different cultures.
Hawaiian performer Puaiohi Te Fries says they've absorbed a lot from strong sharing of knowledge between countries.
It's definitely been super cool to interact with other cultures. Yes, everyone may come from the Pacific, but we're all different in our own cultures. And I think it's very cool that everyone got to share their cultures on a huge platform.
These messages have been echoed by youth delegates from across the Pacific who told RNZ Pacific they are ready to step up as leaders for the 14th Festpac set to be held in New Caledonia in 2028. They say they understand their responsibility to preserve their cultural identities and pass it on to the next generation.
The first of its kind research is exploring the cost of service on Pacific populations. University of Auckland doctoral candidate Asitoa Sampilisi says there's a cultural burden to take care of family, which can come at the cost of our mental health and well-being, especially within Pacific communities. Alicia Foon has more.
If a burden shared is a burden halved, what is the burden of service? University of Auckland doctoral candidate researcher Asitoa Sampilisi is looking to answer this. More than 1,100 people participated in a survey posing the culturally controversial question, is it selfish to look after yourself? He says so far the evidence points to the need for a cultural shift when it comes to prioritising our well-being.
So what I guess trying to do is, give the community the opportunity to talk to the tensions at play, talk to how, give space for people to talk to the aspirations of trying to find some balance, trying to stay culturally grounded, but also make sense of it here in New Zealand or make sense of it in 2024 and find ways for us to shift some of our cultural practices, look at ways in which we can aspire to moving the dial in terms of our social health and well-being outcomes.
He says they are asking Pasifika to stop and take an inward look at themselves, a practice he acknowledged was outside of Pacific people's norms because the focus is on the collective rather than the individual.
But I think there would be those of us that also acknowledge that that comes at a cost. So how is it that we can acknowledge that our family and communities have expectations of us, that we are there to be useful and helpful to the collective? So what are some tools that speak to those very lived realities?
Pasifika Mental Health Group Leva's co-chair Josiah Tualamali'i welcomed the research and says there needs to be more studies on Pacific populations for cultural shifts to happen.
Our families deserve the best of us, and so we don't need to keep serving on empty. Let's make it easier for us to have breaks when we need it.
As someone whose life's mission is to serve his community, he was recently reminded by an elder about the importance of looking after oneself to avoid burnout.
The thing that I was told was that you need to become a kaumātua, you need to become a mātua. You need to be in it for the long haul, Josiah, like all your friends and like the young people that were growing. And so we need you to find how to navigate the different things we have you juggling, and we need all of us to juggle because we have to last the distance. And so that was quite a bit of a difficult whettle to hear, challenge to hear, but an important one that we have to think longer term, and for the collective well-being, maybe that's something we can do for Matariki this year, is think about how we put the things in place that our well-being lasts the distance and the goodness of our identities continue to survive for future generations' well-being.
Findings and recommendations of Sampilisi's research will explore the mental, physical and financial cost of service on Pacific populations, which will officially be released in August.
The United Nations Development Programme, working with other international agencies, including the European Union, is aiming to bring solar energy to communities across Papua New Guinea. In a most recent case, through its EU Strait PNG program in the Sepik region, it has lit up a sub-health centre at Usima village, revolutionising what can be achieved there. Don Wiseman spoke with the PNG country resident for UNDP, Nicholas Booth, who says this work is part of a much larger series of projects.
It's a much broader program around livelihoods and development in East and West Sepik, with a number of UN partners such as ILO and ITU and UNCDF and FAO as well as us. But our specific part, as you rightly say, is around bringing solar to key community infrastructures, and specifically out of the 9 sites, I think 6 of them are schools, different levels, schools, primary, secondary, technical. 3 are community health centres. centres. And we focused on those because, as you know, electricity access, energy access is very unreliable in a lot of the country. It's particularly true in more remote areas. And that is really a critical issue if you're in a school or a health centre. If you're in a health centre, the electricity runs out, you can't do operations, you can't keep vaccines at the right temperature. You know, there's a million things that you simply can't provide the healthcare that people need.
So we can talk about the Osima Sub-Health Centre, particularly interesting. What have you done there?
In that centre, we've installed 10 kilowatt capacity of solar. So the population in that area is 10,000. So basically, and we've installed 44 panels and 15 batteries, and that is going to help that sub-health centre to deliver help to 10,000 people in the area.
Something like that must make a huge difference.
It makes an enormous difference. I don't know if you saw the video that we produced recently. I mean, we've been producing some videos where we talk to people involved in running those health centres, and they talk about how it's changed their lives. One of them was telling my colleague, people used to have to do operations or surgical procedures with a torch in their mouth. So these are some of the kind of things that people, you know, will not have to do. They'll be able to work in decent conditions and bring proper healthcare to people. So they did an incredible job doing what they could in very adverse circumstances. Now they actually have the tools to be able to do the job with decency and properly.
Lots of these sorts of places all across the Highlands and PNG, aren't there? So you've got a whole lot more medical centres and sub-hospitals you need to work on?
Look, the need is huge. Actually, there's a huge access to energy deficit in PNG. Actually, 31% of the population have no access to any kind of power at all. You have grid solutions and off-grid solutions, but 31% of the population is totally left without access to electricity sources at the moment. So there's a huge gap. It's also a huge opportunity in PNG to leapfrog and go straight to renewable energy sources, because PNG has got abundant access to solar power because it's a very sunny country. There's lots of possibilities for hydro in different parts of the country. So so actually PNG could and should be a leader in filling that gap, meeting that gap through renewable sources. And so we're committed in UNDP to really help with that. We're not the only players, but it's a very important priority for us. I think the last time you and I talked on it was about the innovation hubs in Bougainville. And I think the last conversation we had, you know, I talked about the fact that we're bringing solar to community facilities and indeed the whole of the town of Buin. This is another example of our policy around this. And as we are developing the know-how about how to do this in PNG and the connections and demonstrating the difference it makes, we really hope that we're going to get traction. And together with our partners, as you say, we could be doing this in so many places across the country. The need is huge. The need is everywhere in the country. We are really determined to stay the course and do as much as we can if our partners allow us to do it to meet that need.
The program, the East Strait PNG program, its primary focus is on agriculture, isn't it? And it would seem there are so many opportunities in terms of cocoa and coffee and so many crops that can be grown on those vast plains around the big river up in Sepik.
That's right. Look, it's been a very big and successful program. And as you say, other parts of the program, and I mentioned that there are a number of our UN partners who are involved in the program, and they indeed have actually been really focusing on strengthening the value chains for farmers in cocoa and vanilla and fisheries, because as you say, there's huge opportunities for those they have enormous potential for livelihoods. At the same time, what we often discover in PNG, there's a lot of scope for strengthening those. Like quite often they don't go downstream enough. The opportunities to bring products to market is not as developed as it should be. The networks are not there. Sometimes we need to strengthen access to financial inclusion and literacy. So there are many ways in which we can actually strengthen those livelihoods and help people in those areas get more value out of products like cocoa, vanilla and fisheries, and that's exactly what the program has been doing.
That's Pacific Waves for today. To listen back, head over to rnz.co.nz/Pacific. We're also on Spotify, Apple and iHeartRadio. From myself and the RNZ Pacific team, tō whā sui fua.